Today, I'm going to be finishing my medieval farming town based directly on Moonbrook from World of Warcraft. This is all part of a bigger overarching project to recreate Westfall, an iconic questing area from the game filled with rotted fields and dilapidated farmhouses. If you haven't watched the previous 3 episodes of the Westfall project, go ahead and catch yourself up first and meet me back here. Everybody else, strap in, because today's episode is gonna be a banger. Hey there, how's it going? Welcome back to the Let's Play world and welcome back to the Westfall project. In between the last episode and this one, I've been busy donkey maxing. I live streamed for over 7 hours and finished it off with a donkey that's 12.433 meters per second. Now, I was happy with that outcome and was prepared to stop there, but then I made a realization. In the last episode where I built this whole ranch, I noted that my holding stables can have up to 48 donkeys, but that was a lie. Not because I was trying to trick you or anything, I'm just stupid. I realized that it's actually double what I said it was and can hold up to 96 donkeys. This is complete overkill, and in the spirit of actually using all of them at least once, I decided to fill every single slot with a donkey, then check all their speeds in mass. And after doing that off camera, I was able to come across this guy here with 12.755 meters per second, absolutely smashing the previous guy. Figuratively. We don't smash things around here. By the way, the mod I'm using to see the horse's stats in F3 is called Horse Debug Info, and I had to start using it because unfortunately my speed testing track just stopped being effective. Basically, it uses the speed of a hopper minecart sucking out items to give me a number. The lower the number, the faster the donkey. And the problem I started to run into was that the change in a donkey's speed became gradual enough that it wasn't detectable using this system. And I don't think it's possible to measure the speeds accurately enough to work past this point. At least, not yet. Little challenge for you technical Minecrafters out there. Anyways, this guy here is officially the donkey I'll be using around Westfall, and to lock him in, I've got a name tag, Zoomer. And the first thing I want to do with Zoomer is take him on a spin down to the area where I first started this Westfall project back in episode 8. The area that we will soon be calling Moonbrook. Moonbrook is a town from World of Warcraft found in the iconic zone of Westfall, and the goal of today's video is to fully recreate this town in the Let's Play world. And the 3 buildings down here have already gotten the ball rolling on that process. They've been designed and located to mimic the 3 buildings at the back of town. As a quick reminder, the first building is a small home that I'm using as my base of operations and storage area. The second building is a blacksmith that I'm using as a mason villager trading hall, and the third building is a barn that I'm using as a bulk storage unit for stone, which feeds it into the trading hall via a water stream. This trading setup was the only original goal when I started this project, and it's complete. There's nothing else that needs to be done, so the other buildings I'll be putting in today won't be directly related. Instead, their functions will serve to add to the area in other fun and useful ways. You'll see. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first thing I gotta do is lay out the foundations for these other buildings to figure out how big they're gonna be and where they're gonna go. Oh, I already did it. There are 6 more buildings left to do around here, and I've laid them out relatively close to how it is in game. Relatively. These 6 buildings, going clockwise, are a stable, a large home, another small home, a church, an inn, and another small home. I've been busy designing these buildings in a creative world, and these foundations match all of those designs, so I can confidently say that this is the official layout. I've also taken into account the elevations of these buildings based on how the terrain is shaped in-game, and it's essentially going upwards in the northeast direction. Once we get past the buildings though, the topography steepens, and essentially the whole northeastern side of this town is surrounded by tall hills. And I want my terrain here to match that same setup, so you know the deal, it's time to get terraforming. And to begin with, I collected all the sand in the middle because I wanted it. Then I smoothed out the region and put down jack-o'-lanterns since I don't want a mob farm down there when this terraforming is done. After that, I surrounded all my foundations with a 3-wide ring of dirt to get a sense of where each elevation was going to be. Then I started filling in the center area to connect everything together. Again, I was only worried about elevations here, and I'd go back and smooth things out in just a moment. The next step step was to start looking around the edge of town and start developing the hills that'll surround it. This first hill was trying to mimic the one in-game, and while I didn't get it quite right on the first try, it's a good base to mess around with later on. Next, my sights were set on the north end of town, where I started to build out the terrain to look sort of like an extension of the wing at the end of my mountain range, which brought me back around to the hill I'd started on the east side, where I'd finished wrapping it around the inside of town and finally came back to smooth things out in the middle. With that done, I began the steepest and most complicated section of terrain, which is a bowl on the south side of my big hill that'll eventually have a nice little tree resting inside it. And again, part of my mentality here was to just get a good base shape for the terrain. I was fully expecting to have to go back and change a bunch of this later on to get everything right. Luckily though, that hill was about the only part of this terraforming project that I was really trying to mimic carefully. Everything else was more of a freestyle based on the shapes of existing terrain. As long as it looked smooth and connected back to the town properly, I was none the wiser. And this shot here is a really perfect example of that. I'm working off of my big hill that I've already figured out the shape for, so it's really only a matter of sloping it down at the desired angle and smoothing it with the terrain below. And this process is essentially what I continue to do over at the north end to finish the project off. Again, the rest of this is mostly just freestyle terraforming. I wasn't concerned with it being accurate past the edge of town, since my goal is to only accurately recreate Moonbrook, not the surrounding area. And speaking of the surrounding area, I also did a little extra work further north just to clean up all the mangled terrain over there, and also because I had a little extra time during the live stream. This terraforming project was completed in front of a live studio audience over the course of 4-hour streams at twitch.tv/coolingmystery. I'll be streaming a lot of my progress over there from now on, so if that sounds interesting to you, head on over and give me a follow. Give it to me. I gotta say, just by adding that terrain in, this area already feels 10 times better. It looks very clean and things are really just starting to take shape around here. By the way, like I mentioned earlier, I made sure to light up all the cavities underground here and make sure everything's copacetic just cause that's the way I like it. And I'd prefer not to deal with the mob farm otherwise. The challenge is to not blow anything up. Okay. Nice. All right, now it's time to move on to the construction of the buildings. And I was thinking, instead of just doing another big time lapse where I complete everything all at once, how about I shake it up and do one at a time? In light of the fact that Zoomer needs a proper home, I'm thinking that I'll start with the stable. I've gone ahead and put together the redstone portion of this stable so I can explain how it works. And it should be fairly obvious. There's 3 identical stalls with pistons that'll push up and block off the exit so the horses can't escape. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, okay, big deal. Why is this anything special? Allow me to go on an incredibly niche tangent. Normally, you'd place the button a block down to reach the redstone easier, but the problem with that is when you're on a horse, it's difficult to spot the button with its big, fat head in the way. So the solution is to place the button a block up, which is right at eye level. Great. Only now it means that you need a redstone wire sticking out the back of your building, which might work for some designs, but it doesn't work for the stable. So that begs the question, how on earth did I get this to work here? There's no redstone anywhere. This is an incredibly niche and weird mechanic that I'm not going to pretend that I fully understand, but here's how it works. The hopper has all its slots occupied, and the barrel contains an item that's different from what's in the hopper, causing the hopper to sit in a perpetual state of trying and failing to pick up the item above, and the comparator, somehow, reads this activity and sends constant block updates over to the piston. From there, it's just a matter of quasi-connectivity to send the button's signal to the piston. Quasi-connectivity is the behavior of a piston that allows it to receive signals from an extra block away because its code was essentially created by copy-pasting the source code for a door. I know, right? Pretty lazy. Anyways, quasi-connectivity only works with a block update, and I've already established that this thing is a block update engine, so it works. Thanks, r/redstone. Let's keep this thing moving. And for the majority of this building, it's the typical wood material palette that we're familiar with here. Stripped spruce logs for the primary supports, oak as a sort of secondary support, and birchwood making up the wall material. The cool thing about this design, though, is the upper level only uses oak supports. So it's got a unique look where it's darker at the bottom with the spruce wood and lighter at the top with the oak and birch, kind of like a gradient. The hay bale roofs are always fun as well. When I design them, I try and mess around with the orientations of the hay to give the impression that it's all tied together the way that it looks in-game. After the base structure is done, there are all sorts of other little details left to do. Something new that I tried out for this design was the use of birch signs along the inner walls to look like wood paneling. It's something that I've seen before, and I'm giving it a whirl, but I'm on the fence about it. Get it? because I'm on a fence, and cut that. Finally, the last thing is the detailing along the roof, which, let's be honest, it's not about that, it's about mob proofing. Rails and carpets are both non-spawnable blocks. The rails follow the impressions of the hay bales to further enhance the idea that they're tied together, and the carpets add a bit of texture while also hiding the jack-o'-lanterns. And it doesn't just stop with the roof. Every surface around here is carefully mob proofed, whether it's pressure plated over here or my personal favorite, yeah, trapdoors let through light. The more you know. Okay, that is officially the first building down, and I think it turned out great. It really feels like it fits well alongside the other buildings around here. And let's do a quick resemblance check. Nice, dude, yeah. By the way, this stable has the closest proximity to the storage barn, which works out great because in practice, I'll be coming over to drop off all my shulker boxes, and right after that, I can conveniently drop off Zoomer in the stable to wait for the next trip. In this case though, Zoomer's gonna have to wait a little bit longer for me to finish the rest of the town. And next up, I think I'm gonna do this building here, which is gonna be the large home. Just like last time, I went ahead and built up the redstone to show off, and for this one, I'm going for an automatic bone meal-based crop farm, otherwise known as a micro farm. These farms are generally pretty simple. The basic idea is to use bone meal and redstone to AFK crop farm. But before I get into this design, let's go over here and talk about this one that I built as a demonstration. If you Google a micro farm, you'll more than likely land on this design, which is the bog standard model that everybody uses. And for good reason. It's cheap, easy to build, and works well enough. It relies on the mechanic where crops will automatically pop off the soil when the light level is 0. And if we look at it in slow motion, the piston extends so you can place down your crop, then the crop will get bone mealed by 3 dispensers, and finally the piston retracts, subjecting the crop to a light level of 0, upon which it will pop off and the cycle repeats. The problem with this design is that it's not completely reliable because sometimes you can place a crop at the wrong time and it'll be out of sync. Beyond that, it's also just not a very clean interface, having to wedge yourself in a corner and click in a small area between the piston, and I've never liked it for those reasons. That's where this design comes in. The interface is open because instead of utilizing the light level mechanic, it just uses the piston to directly harvest the crop. Furthermore, the piston is getting 0 ticked, which involves more complex redstone to pull off, but the benefit is that the planting, bone meal, and harvest process all happen during the same tick. So not only is it faster than the previous design, it's also 100% reliable because it isn't dependent on a sequence since it's all occurring at once. By the way, 0 ticking is a process where you create a 0 tick pulse. When you apply it to a piston, it will both extend and retract during the same tick. Creating a 0 tick pulse involves an understanding of tick phases, which is the order with which different events occur in between ticks. If you'd like to learn more about 0 ticks, then I'd recommend you check out this video here because frankly, I'm not qualified to talk about this. On top of that, I'm not really qualified to talk about this design either, but what I am able to do is flash a thumbnail on screen to the original video where I found this design. Both links will be down below. I'm glad that I'm finally putting one of these in because wheat has been an issue for me, what with all these hay bale roofs I've been doing around Westfall. It is, of course, worth mentioning though that I did build this manual farm last episode and it's been a more than plentiful source for me since then. So while I don't really need another farm, especially one that takes bone meal, I'm glad that I'm building it as an option regardless. And the building that it's gonna occupy, fun fact, was the quickest out of all these buildings to design because I essentially just incorporated the same design elements I'd already done for my other buildings. So it was just a matter of fitting those elements into the unique shape of the building and tweaking things here and there to get it to look right. The exterior wood design, again, is a combo of spruce wood as the main supports, oak wood as a secondary support / exterior paneling, and the birch wood is the actual wall material. I also mimic the windows looking worn down by mixing regular and gray glass together, and for the window in the back, I even put in black concrete, which both hid the redstone for the micro farm and nicely recreated the look of a dark broken window. But the exterior was only half the build, and though I designed that portion quickly, the interior was quite the opposite. Up to this point, I haven't been concerned with recreating the interiors of these buildings, mainly because there hasn't been enough room for that to even be an option. For instance, my barn's got this bulk storage system barely squeezed in from wall to wall. And for the blacksmith, there's no way I could have added anything besides the trading setup. There is this corner over here, but even that's filled with redstone and storage. All of that's to say that this was the first time I was really able to tackle an interior recreation, and here's how I did. When you first enter, there's an entryway space and a back lounge room. Now, since the micro farm sits in that whole room, I just had to wall it off and add an interface. Everything else stayed about the same, and as you make your way into the next space, you'll find a staircase along the entry wall, the fireplace on the opposite side, and a big structural column in the middle. Upstairs is nothing too special. It's essentially just a landing area, but I think it turned out pretty spot on. I obviously neglected to add all the broken furniture. And last but not least, the upstairs room has a cute little fireplace connected to the same chimney, and though it didn't have much going for it, I went ahead and added some functionality to the room, more on that later. Obviously, since the micro farm is the main purpose for this build, I made sure it was front and center and easy to access, and just over here I made some storage for the 4 different crop types. Although, let's be honest, I'm primarily just going to be using this thing for wheat. I added a door here so that there's a chamber to catch all of the drops. I found that otherwise the items would just get launched out of reach, and that not so good. Also, I went ahead and added some more birch signs around the walls here. I think I'm less on the fence about it now. And if I head on into the last room here, I figured that this would be a perfect place to access the chest that'll fill the farm with bone meal. I'm thinking I'll use these shelves here to store some bone blocks, which I'll uncraft and throw into the system as needed. At the moment though, not so good. Anyways, I think that's about it for this one. Resemblance check. Yummy. Now this building, full disclosure, is my favorite, not just because it's gonna look sick, but also because of its special feature. This redstone contraption is sitting inside what will soon be a bell tower, which is basically the defining feature of this church. And I thought that it would be really cool if it actually was a bell tower. So once again, I searched around on YouTube and found this design right here, except wait a minute, that link is just for this video. Haha, you just got pranked, I made this design myself. It uses a signal from a daylight sensor to trigger a bell, but it's not that simple, otherwise it would just look like this. The first thing I added was a pulse extender set to extend the signal long enough for the bell to ring 12 times. And fun fact, this is the same pulse extender I used for the horse track timer. The other thing that I did was switch it to a nighttime sensor, which means it's looking for night instead of day, and that's important because I want this bell to essentially function as an alarm that tells me when I should be going to bed. The way I achieved this was by using a comparator subtraction setup that lets the signal through as long as the nighttime sensor emits a signal of 3 or greater. This works out to be around the time when you can sleep in your bed, and then later when your bed spits you back out. All in all, it's pretty simple redstone, but it was tricky to get it to fit into the tower. I suppose y'all want to see that part next, don't you? Well, too bad, because I saved that part for last, so instead let's talk about the rest of the build, which, like last time, uses oak wood supports and a birch wood wall. It does not, however, use spruce wood very much, and you'll see why in a minute. The broken window design appears again in a few places, but most of the windows are a new design that's open. And I did this because it was the only way to have the double trapdoor border on both sides of the wall, which I think makes for a really cool look, since it's about as close as we'll ever get to vertical slabs. Since the bell tower redstone barely took up any space, I once again had the freedom to recreate the interior for this one, which mostly consisted of a single large gathering room that extended all the way up to the roof line. And speaking of the roof, this design is made out of spruce wood instead of hay bales, which was so nice because it meant that I could use stairs, slabs, and trapdoors to achieve a greater level of detail and shape. I even snuck in some reversed barrels just to give it a bit of texture. And don't think I forgot about the bell tower. Last but not least, that structure is composed of a birch layer first, and then an oak wood framework around it to represent the wood slat construction. And finally, at the tippy top here, we've got a nice little landing area, and it's cool because this is actually a really good vantage point around Westfall. I added trapdoor access to the redstone in case I ever needed to get at it, and unfortunately, the bell has to sit down here. I wanted it to actually be visible on the platform up there, but since it's spaced out unevenly, it just would have looked weird, so this is the compromise. Anyways, when you head on in, there's a small vestibule space that leads into the rest of the church. In-game, there's actually 2 vestibule spaces, one at the main entrance and then another that goes right through the bell tower. But for logistical reasons, I instead decided to just have one vestibule, and then the bell tower space is behind this door here where I can access all the redstone. As for the main hall, I think I recreated it decently well. It turned out narrower than the original, but all the same elements are there, with structural columns along the walls that connect up to beams and a large vaulted ceiling space showing the narrow roof above. It's a really fun space, and I'm happy with how it turned out. I also thought this would be a perfect location to put a nether portal, so I went ahead and hooked that up too and connected it with my nether tunnel. You might have noticed also that I decided not to put birch signs on the walls in this one, and as you can see, I am not on the fence. It's a neat detail, but I didn't think it really added anything. Plus, I learned recently that signs can cause lag like item frames do, and boy do I dislike that. So I went ahead and took them down. One last thing before we move on, there isn't supposed to be a room right here, it's just walled off. But if you look on the outside, there's this extra space in the floor plan that seemingly just doesn't get used. So I thought it was a good idea to put in a quick little storage closet in this area. I didn't want to waste the space. Resemblance check. Oh, it's so perfect. All right, moving along here, and the fourth building is already in. Yeah, I built it already. Was it worth it for the joke? Honestly, I don't know. This building was actually really challenging to design because it suffers from what I like to call the painfully plain syndrome. Nothing about this building is interesting. It's got a basic wood material palette, there aren't any standout details, it's just kind of a building. And that meant that I couldn't rely on a cool design to carry most of the weight, so instead I had to really push myself and make this plain building look interesting. I know it doesn't look like much, but trust me, a lot of time went into getting it to this point, and I haven't even talked about the interior yet. Once again, I took a crack at recreating the interior for this one, but compared to the home and the church where I had a lot of room to work with, this one was a lot more of a pain in the I wanted this building to house a villager breeder because I figured it would be smart to have one on hand in the event that, God forbid, something happens at my trading hall and I need to replenish my villagers. But fitting this into this did not turn out to be very easy when I'm also trying to make an accurate interior. So again, after a ton of time tinkering around in creative, I eventually had the clever idea to drop the baby villagers down the chimney, and then they get sent over to the room in the back. The setup allows the whole downstairs room to stay mostly the same with the exception of the back room, which again is the holding cell for my new villagers. If I go upstairs, this is where I put the actual breeding setup, and because of the size of this thing, I had to pretty much give up on the interiors up here, so I just winged it. And I think it turned out pretty good. The villager breeder is the same design I've used in the past by Logical Geek Boy, and when I built it, I just transferred over the guys from my temporary setup and finally took that thing down. So now if I ever need villagers, all I'll have to do is come over here and press the secret lovemaking button, which will open up the breeder and allow the villagers to start pumping out little babies. I can say hello to the babies as they drop down, and the holding cell will filter out the villagers once they've grown into adults. Whenever I'd like to request a new villager, I can press this button here to pick one up in a minecart, and I've routed the rails to go underground and then back out the window over here. The idea is that I'll build a temporary track off this line and send them wherever they need to go. If I'm lucky though, I'll never have to test it out. Resemblance check. Yep, that's definitely a building. Last but not least, you all know this one, I've got to build 2 more of my small homes, which are the exact same as my starter shack. There's one wedged between the large home and the church, and the other one is to the right of the inn, facing my starter shack on the other side of the road. I went ahead and put some extra storage in here since I'm thinking I'll use both these buildings now for my base of operations. And in doing so, I was able to clean up a lot of the chests in here since I don't have to cram it all together anymore, which was getting rather cramped. I digress. The other building over here was assigned the task of nothing. I didn't have any good ideas, so I figured I shouldn't force it and instead just left it blank. I'll fill it when the need arises. Both of these new buildings are the exact same design as the first one, but I did flip things around and redo the texturing so they're still unique buildings, even though you'd probably never notice anyways. Also, I added hidden ender chests underneath each of the fireplaces. Why not? Resemblance, honestly, you get it. Man, oh man, this town is really starting to come together now that all the buildings are in place. And you'll notice that I tried something different today and avoided doing a time lapse for that whole process. It was fun, but if I'm honest, I kinda wish I'd done it anyways. Don't worry about it, man. Those stupid time lapses were getting old anyways. It was for the best. And do you know what? I'm proud of you. What? Why do you have that look on your face? Why do I hear music? No. No. No! Now that wasn't so bad, was it? I hate you. Let's keep this show on the road. The next area I want to work on takes place atop the big hill to the right of my church. And as you can see, I'm making some quick adjustments to the terraforming, which will make room for the details I'll be putting up there. If we look at this hill in game, and by the way, this is the same spot that'll have a little tree in the middle, this location is basically an outpost with tents and supplies and a griffin roost. And it's funny because going into this project, I wasn't gonna even bother adding this area in since it'd just be an aesthetic piece. But I randomly just changed my mind, and I'm glad that I did, because now that it's in place, I think it makes a huge difference by adding context to the town. These tents were really a challenge to design because I obviously wanted them to look good, but I also wanted them to be pretty small to fit with the scale of everything else, and I think I did a pretty good job here. I used double iron trapdoors to, again, go for a makeshift vertical slab type of deal, and I even managed to add in some banners to make it feel pretty tent-like, I think. Another cool detail is over here at the griffin roosts, where I used yellow coral fans to represent hay. And the coral is able to retain its color because they're atop upside down waterlogged stairs. It's simple, but I think it's a sweet little detail. The last thing that I've got to do here is add in the flags that'll go on top of this flagpole. And if we look at this in game, the blue one on top is the Alliance flag, and the red one below is some sort of griffin roost flag, I think. I guess that doesn't really matter as long as the adaptation looks good, and I think I got pretty close. Here's the problem with these designs though. This one requires a globe pattern, and this one requires a snout pattern. The globe wasn't tricky at all, it just required trading with a cartographer that I totally didn't dispose of afterwards. But the snout pattern required looting a bastion, which I'd never done before, and this happened. You know, I really disappoint myself sometimes. Oh, I'm dead. That's all my stuff right there. Luckily, I didn't lose everything there, and I was able to make it back with enough netherite to upgrade my first pick, and more importantly, I got my hands on a snout pattern. So let's go ahead and make the Alliance pattern first. It goes as follows. 1, 2, 3, the snoot, 4, and 5. And as for the other flag, we got 1, 2, 3, the globe, 4, and 5. Let's get these bad boys up here. Nice. Okay, there's still a lot of other details I have to add around here, but before we get into that, I think it's finally time to set the canvas for this project. Just like I did for my donkey ranch up in the mountains, I went ahead and converted all the grass around town into pathway blocks, which gives the area its signature Westfall look. I love doing this because it really transforms the area into the dead and drotted biome that I'm going for. And on top of that, it even mob-proofs the area since pathway blocks are non-spawnable. So now that I'm all safe here, sort of, let's do a quick rundown of what's left to do. First off, there are a bunch of custom trees I'd like to build that'll be the same style as the ones I built up at my ranch. Second, I want to get the pathways and roads in place that'll connect all the buildings together. And third, I want to do a big sweep around town, thoroughly mob-proofing and adding in all sorts of details like carts, fences, lampposts, and pretty much anything else that I want to finish off this project. So let's knock out the first thing on the list. I got all my extra tree materials stored in the new shack over here, and I'm gonna go ahead and grab this stuff and get these trees built. This should not be as bad as last time. There are only 20 trees in Moonbrook, and most of them are the small ones. Awesome. Each of these custom trees were placed exactly as so in game, which of course meant that I got to build the 2 small ones in the Outpost Hill. Turns out there were 2 of them. But the most notable tree is the massive orange one in between the barn and the blacksmith that admittedly kind of blocks your view of those buildings. I was almost tempted to skip over it, but looking at it now, it doesn't even block the buildings that much, and I think it looks great. Having these trees in place really helps to fill the space around here, and I'm thinking I might even add a few extra ones in some empty areas, but for now, I'm gonna move on and maybe revisit that later. Which means the next thing I'm working on here is gonna be the actual roads and pathways. And it's very ironic, by the way, that none of it is going to be made out of pathway blocks. Instead, the palette I'm going for is the same as what I started over here with cobblestone, gravel, and light gray concrete powder. I really want these roads to be accurate to the game, and in order to achieve that, I've got kind of a different idea. Many sections of this terrain are only a block thick, which is annoying when I've got to place down gravity blocks, especially when I'm very likely to change this path more than a few times to get the right shape. And on top of that, there's the aspect of texturing all the different blocks together and adding in the hidden lighting, which when you combine all that together sounds like a really arduous process. So here's my solution. Instead of trying to get it all down at once, I'm just going to focus on figuring out the basic shape and layout by placing concrete powder on top of my pathway blocks, which will imprint the layout with dirt that I can then dig out and work with later. And I'm really glad I decided to do it this way because it allowed me to concentrate on getting the layout just how I wanted. The big sweeping curve at the bottom was a major focus point, and the intersection at the top took a lot of finagling to get it how I wanted. And you'll notice that the location of the fountain in the middle is actually quite a bit different from the original. There's a good reason for that, and we'll get into it later. But I digress. The next thing I started to do was alter some of the terrain around the road to make it feel more embedded into the hill. And that brought me over to the flat, underdeveloped south end of town where I gave it some much needed attention. During this process, I frequently referenced the game to give me hints as to how I should form the hills. How high should they be? What's their shape? How do they connect with other hills? And so on. I finished off the area by covering it in pathway blocks, and then I was finally able to move on to developing the rest of the road around Moonbrook. Kind of. You see, this turned out to be a chicken-egg type of situation. I couldn't get the road's elevation and shape without first figuring out the terrain. But since I was also wrapping the terrain around the road, I needed the road to be in place first, and I think you see the problem. My solution was to basically just go back and forth, slowly getting it dialed in, which subsequently got me thinking about how I'm going to shape the terrain in the greater area. Going into this section of the project, I was only planning on developing a minimal amount of the surrounding terrain, and I'd focus on expanding it in another video. But it was at this point here where I officially got carried away and decided to deforest the whole southeastern area, level the existing terrain by 2 or 3 blocks, and completely reconstruct the area. Again, I reference Westfall throughout this process to adapt the hills faithfully, not because it was super important to me or anything, but just because it was a really easy way to get ideas for how to develop the terrain. And as I did this, I began to pick up on certain criteria that made this terrain style. Since it's smooth, there's always a gentle transition between curves from a bird's eye view. And on the side view, there's at least a block or two between elevation changes so the hill doesn't ever get too steep. I've said it before and I'll say it again, this process is very therapeutic and I love doing it. Even though I didn't need to do this much extra space around Moonbrook, I wanted to. Besides, it'll be good in the long run to have all this extra terrain figured out because when I eventually come back to expand Westfall further, I won't need to spend as much time terraforming. Anyways, once I was done with the southeast region, I finished it off with pathway blocks and moved on over to the north side of town. I wanted all this extra terrain to have a relatively even radius around Moonbrook, and that meant expanding a big chunk of the north side to match what I'd done on the south end. The process was the same as before, so why don't I just shut up for this last section and let it roll. All right, and there we go. All of the surrounding terraforming is done. It's funny, as I was going through that time-lapse footage, one of the things that became apparent to me is how easily you lose sight of how much work this actually is. Because yeah, this is a pretty large area through here. I think that this is a great vantage point for all this new terrain. You can really start to get a sense of the gentle rolling hills that'll cover the land of Westfall. Just imagine this stretching in every direction as far as the eye can see. That's what I want this area to be someday. But not today, though. This is as far as it's gonna get in this episode because it's time to turn my attention back to the roads and pathways. Now that everything's laid out, I can go ahead and remove the top layer of material, revealing the imprint of the road that I'll use as my guide. From there, I'll relocate that dirt one block down to be the base layer for the gravity blocks. And lastly, I can go in and add the final textured road. One of the important things about this process was making sure to add enough noise around the edges to make it look worn, but not so much noise that it destroys the shape of the road. I did spend a bunch of time after all trying to get the shape just right. This area is really coming together. I like it. Per the usual with my pathways, I threw in some rocks as a little added detail, and there's hidden lighting underneath each of the carpets. I made sure as I went to check that every single block was mob-proofed. I also went ahead and developed the fountain at the center of town here, and I absolutely love this detail. I don't know how well known of a trick this is, but I randomly discovered that beacon beams will transmit through walls, which allowed me to make this really cool beacon fountain hybrid. And if it wasn't obvious already, this is the reason I relocated the fountain. It's supposed to sit somewhere over here, but I figured it'd look kind of awkward to have the beacon beams sitting right next to it, so I just opted to merge the two together, and I'm not disappointed. The other thing I wanted to quickly touch on is the tent area over here. The layout's made out of dirt, so I just used the same palette I did over at my ranch with dirt, coarse dirt, and spruce wood. I've got more plans for this area, so we'll check it out more in a minute, but for now, let's move on. Okay, so the first two steps are knocked out, all of the trees are in place, and the pathways and roads are nicely laid out. That leaves us with the final step to mob-proof and detail the area, and I think the best way to cover that is to make a quick cut. Because all of this detail work is best explained when it's already been completed. It's been over 12 hours of work since that cut, and in that time I've put in fences, lampposts, foliage, and a ton of other cool stuff, so let's go over it. First of all, I put leaf droppings at the bottom of each tree. Orange droppings for the orange trees and yellow for the yellow trees. For the dead ones, I just made a pile of dirt with buttons to represent sticks. And the other thing you'll notice is that I made the amount of droppings proportional to the size of each tree. This is the same thing that I did over at my donkey ranch here. In fact, you'll notice a lot of returning details like fences and lampposts and so on. But the difference with Moonbrook is I took the detailing down there to a whole new level. First of all, there are all sorts of crates and barrels and other abandoned supplies scattered all around town. There are a bunch of abandoned wagons at varying stages of decay. This one's in pretty good shape, but this one over here by comparison is, grounded. This one's my favorite over here. It's supposed to be a stagecoach. And I don't mean to toot my horn too hard here, but come on, the grindstones that match up as wheels, mwah, chef's kiss. But how about we head up to the tent area up here, and this place was by far where I went the most crazy with the detailing. For the sake of time, I'm not gonna go around and show you every detail and then compare it to World of Warcraft. Just take my word for it, okay? All of this matches pretty closely to how it looks in-game. There are a lot of returning details around here. Wagons, crates, barrels, an Alliance banner on this end here, and then a second one on the other side over there. But the big thing that I did was, since this is a supply outpost, there were all sorts of weapons and armor laying around, and I wanted to do my best to represent that. Some of it's simple with these armor stands over here, and some of it's not so simple with these armor stands over here. For these ones, I was trying to make them look like rapiers, and this big guy is supposed to look like a big gold sword plunged into the ground. It looks straightforward, but it actually took a bit of redstone trickery to get it. I placed snow layers up by 7 and then covered them with a carpet. Then I put down a dispenser with an armor stand in it and used that to get it in between the snow and the carpet. From there, getting the armor on was easy. And once all of these details were in place, I realized that there was some untapped potential with these tents. We've got armor and weapon themes, 3 tents, and 3 different types of smithing villagers. So, to my utmost delight, I actually got use out of my villager breeder and used it to supply my tents with villagers. This one over here, naturally, is for the armorer, so now anytime I need new diamond gear, I'll come over to this guy. The one on the left here is the toolsmith, and I gotta be honest with you guys, I'll probably be visiting this guy frequently moving forward, considering how many tools I still break by accident. And finally, this one over here, of course, is for the weaponsmith. And for each of these tents, I've included grindstones because all of these different tool and gear trades give you enchanted versions of these items. It's easier to just put together the enchantments on an anvil with a blank tool, so I just go ahead and disenchant them right away. Anyways, I'm really glad that I did this. It just gives the area way more life and character having actual villagers in here. And you know what? I think this deserves a quick resemblance check. Awesome. Another area worth mentioning is over on the south end of town where I put in sprawling piles of hay just like it is in game. I even went the extra mile and tried to match the size and location of each bundle. Was it worth doing it this way? No, it was not. My favorite thing about this spot though is this little scarecrow I made. Yet another armor stand trick that I think turned out fantastic. I started by placing an armor stand on top of a slab. Then using pistons, I pushed the fence post 2 blocks down to connect with the fence gates on either side. And once that's done, the only thing left to do is get him all scarecrowed up. And while I'm again talking about armor stands, this is a great reminder to show off the wayfinding sign I came up with last episode. This one just stacks 2 signs on top of each other and uses an armor stand to make the post look more solid. I like this setup because it kind of forces you to put the signage in off-center locations, which just feels a little bit more unique. I also put another one over here, and as Westfall grows, I'll continue to sprinkle these in at forks in the road. Another cool thing I did with signs was use Unicode dots to represent nails putting this chair together. I even dyed it white to try and make the nails look more metallic. And if you don't know what Unicodes are, it's essentially a library of graphical characters that you can use by using different key combinations. For instance, hitting Alt to 6 will create this right pointing arrow. The library is huge. There are hundreds of different characters to choose from, and in my first attempt to really make something with this, I created this Westfall sign here that's supposed to mimic the one in game. Shout out to these people in my stream for helping me with this process. Another cool thing over here is this special fence I made with blackstone and wither skulls. It's super extra, but super sick, and it's actually referencing the graveyard that's back behind the church. I went ahead and made an exit out this back room here and connected that with a graveyard I made. And surprise, surprise, it's mimicking a graveyard in game. A fun little Easter egg I included here is there are names on some of these gravestones, and these are actually the usernames of bot accounts that would show up in my streams and try and plug their paid viewers. Every time I caught one, I'd ban them and add their name to the graveyard. Get it? Because they're dead to me. Anyways, I thought that was pretty fun and worth mentioning, but other than that, I think I've just about covered every major thing that I did. I guess one other important thing is I added this gravelly border around each of the buildings. I noticed it was a thing in game, and by adding that in, it makes the buildings feel more integrated into the terrain. Just look, this is a building without a border, and this is a building with one. Big difference, right? Other than that though, there are some extra trees here and there and a few other little details, but I think you guys get the idea, so how about we move on? One thing I was waiting to add till this exact point is this bad boy right here. It's supposed to represent the pile of bones in front of the stable, but now it also represents the first time I tried playing with charged creepers. Screw it, I'm just gonna charge a bunch of creepers. We're going crazy tonight. I don't even care. Oh my god. I was actually able to get a second skull during my endeavors, so how about I throw that one down as well to really commemorate that moment. And if it wasn't clear already, the majority of the progress for this video was completed on stream. This project took 26 live streams spanning the course of 3 months, with each stream usually running over 8 hours. I've really grown to enjoy streaming, and moving forward, I plan to stream most of my progress live for the foreseeable future. If that sounds like something you're interested in being a part of, again, head on over and drop me a follow on Twitch. Thanks in advance. Mwah. So I'm sure you've surmised that we're getting close to the end here. We've completed step 3, adding all the detailing in and mob proofing the whole area. And I didn't really mention the mob proofing part. Most of the time, I'm just gonna let you take my word for it. It's always the same process of making sure things are either lit up or covered in a non-spawnable block. And I like to think I use a good balance of both while also making it look nice. I use a mod called Mini HUD to show a visual overlay of the light levels on each block, and it's an indispensable tool for this process. But I digress. With that step completed, there are only 2 more little things I want to do before I sign off. Number 1, I want to add quad beacons all around town, not just in the middle here. I'd like to use speed, strength, resistance, and regeneration for my final array. There's no need for haste now that all the terraforming is done. I'm also coloring the beacon beams with light gray glass, white glass, and then light gray again to give it a subtle off-white color that feels better around Westfall compared to the straight white that feels a little too harsh. And besides the well, of course, the other quad arrays are hidden in these little patches here with brown carpet to cover up the glass. Voila! 12 more beacons later, and now I've got a total of 5 quad beacons all around Moonbrook. And that brings us to item number 2. I never actually hooked up the bell tower to a nighttime sensor. So, to finish this episode off, how about I go ahead and do that? I'm thinking I'll hide the sensor right here and cover it up with a carpet. Okay, and then directly below, I went and built the same signal strength detection circuit I showed off earlier and connected that to the piston that activates the system above. Why don't we try it out? That wasn't right. Oh, I think I see the problem. The bell needs to go up another block. I think the timer was locking the bell. There we go. All right, moment of truth. The sun is setting and nice. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and with the clock striking 12, I can officially call this a finished project. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give me those likes and subscriptions if you're so inclined. This video took a while to make. In my head, I thought that this was gonna be a breezy little video because it didn't sound like much when I was planning it out. But guys, to put it into perspective, this project was as big, if not bigger, than my donkey ranch. That project took, and I'm lowballing this by the way, around 100 hours to complete. This one was over 120, and I'm sure that I would have been able to get that number down if I hadn't tried so hard to accurately recreate this town. But where's the fun in that? Besides, after putting all that work in, I can finally relax up here and say, resemblance check. Thanks for watching.